6. We have a couple folks wander in here in a minute, that's fine. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight and visiting with us. We've done this meeting, I think the second year now we've done these meetings this time of year, and honestly, the goal of these meetings is really just try to give you guys some more information, try to provide information more related to how we can manage CWD within the core areas during the season. Try to give you that information, make sure everybody understands kind of the management permit, not say management seal, not management permits. Try to make sure that folks that want those, that can get those, and help you get those filled out however you need to, or get you information for that. And then we also try to provide a little bit of information on the past winter operations, so what kind of went down from January 16 through March 15 of last year, kind of make sure everybody has some additional data from that work being done. And then we'll also provide just a little bit of information with one of our private land conservationists on private lands projects that are available to landowners throughout the area here for you to help manage your lands for anything that you're interested in land from a natural resource perspective. So we do a lot of talk about CWD, we do a lot of talk about shooting additional deer. We feel like at some point in time we probably want to make sure that you guys understand that we do care about the natural resources that are here and trying to provide good habitats on your properties. And many of you have that same thought, I think, that you want to manage your land as best you can. And we have a lot of great programs as an agency that can help you do that. We want to make sure folks understand that. So we try to keep all this down to about an hour. If you guys have questions as we work through this, raise your hand. We'll get to them and try to share information. We'll try not to drag out too much in between each of the three presentations that are going to be up here, just so we can kind of get through this within that hour time frame. But as always, when this is all said and done, if you've got questions later that you want to talk to us about, you got concerns, we'll stay here until the last person goes home and answer those questions. Just real quick, if you didn't pick up one of these, if you're a landowner in the core area, then you've received one of these. There's additional ones out back, but you should have got this. So this is just an information sheet that just tells you kind of how things went last winter and the results of some of the winter operations that we did post-season and during the season. Give you an idea of how many deer were removed, how many positives we found, breaks it down in a couple different ways, kind of gives you the numbers over the past several years, gives you a little bit of a map, kind of give you an idea of where positive deer have been removed. But just really breaks it down, trying to be as transparent as you possibly can so that you all know what's going on, gives you a little information that you know is the most up-to-date as we can get it out there. So we're trying to make sure that you see that. We understand from you guys, the more information we can give you, the happier you are. We're not trying to hide anything here other than just get that information out the best we possibly can. Hopefully you grabbed a deer book. If you didn't, make sure you get one. There's a test on this tonight, so get to reading 75 pages of stuff. We'll spare you the test. But just one thing to point out here, there are 2 new CWD seasons. So 2 new firearms deer seasons. An antlerless portion that's open in the designated counties, which are CWD management zone counties, October 6th through 8th. And then there's CWD portion that's open in designated counties that's extended past the end of our normal firearms deer season. So November 22 to 26, additional opportunity to harvest more deer at the end of our normal firearms deer season. Everyone that's within these management zone counties, St. John, Perry, Jefferson counties are all part of that season. So just be aware that's a new part of the season added. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Turner. She's going to talk about, she's our regional planner out of the Cape Girardeau office. She is also our incident commander for CWD this year. So she's kind of taken over the role that I've had several years. The last couple of years she's been doing that. And she's going to talk to you mostly about the management permits that we have out there and how to get those, and make sure you guys understand what all it takes to get that information and answer questions as we go. So with that, we'll start, and then we'll kind of bounce through the rest of the other couple presenters, and then we'll take questions as we go. Sarah?
Good evening. As you said, my name is Sarah Turner, and most of you have probably talked to me on the phone or via email. We've got a great group of folks that answer those CWD hotline numbers, but if they don't know how to answer your question, they usually forward it to me, and I get to help help solve your problem and crack the code, help you with any issues that you have in regards to CWD. So I'm going to talk to you about CWD management permits tonight. Hopefully all of you received a letter in the last few days that has the management permit application and some information for you. So these are for extra permits, up to 10 permits that you can use. You can use all 10 yourself, or you can divvy them up among your friends and family, neighbors, as long as it adds up to 10. And you'll need their name, their birth date, and their conservation ID number. If you don't know their conservation ID number, or they don't, if you get their birth date and their first name and last name, I can help you find the conservation ID number if you call us. But these are to use during the regular hunting seasons that you see on the back of this book right here, from September 15th to January 15th. This is different than our winter operations. A lot of people get this confused. So CWD management permits are to be used during regular seasons, and then the winter operations, did I just go dead? That kind of went out. The winter operations go from January 16th to March 15th, and that is when you sign up at one of our meetings in January, or you call us, and then we give you an authorization to destroy deer. And with that operation, you can hunt at night and use bait, and that's the difference in these two things. So this is management permits to use during the regular season. A lot of people prefer to manage their deer during the regular season versus in winter operations. The weather's a bit nicer, and for other reasons too. So I'm going to go through the process a little bit of helping you decipher how to do this. So, and this is all in the packet you received in the mail. You can apply online at that website. You can also fill out that paper and mail it in, or you can fill out that paper and bring it by the Cape office or the Perryville office or any conservation place that you can find one of us in a triangle, and we can enter it into that website for you. If you enter it on the website, the processing is shorter, just because the mail takes a while, and then it can take up to 2 weeks to process it once they get it in the system. So any landowner within the CWD zone that has 5 contiguous acres should have received one of these letters. If you got a letter, then you are eligible to apply for these permits. And like I said, you could get up to 10, and all you need is your MDC landowner ID, and that's at the top of that letter, right by your name, and I'll show you where that's at. Verify your address, phone number, email address, and again, first name, last name, date of birth, conservation ID, and the number of permits that you want each person to have. So on your letter, your top of your letter looks like this. Right there, where that blue arrow is pointing, is your landowner ID. So it might say St. Genevieve _ and a 3 or 4 digit number. Or if you're in Perry County, it might say Perry _ and a 3-digit number. Make sure if it's in all caps, that you enter it in all caps. If it's got an uppercase and then lowercase, you enter it just like it appears on your letter. So this gentleman right here has St. Genevieve, and his starts with a capital S and then lowercase TE and then a space. So don't add any periods or spaces, just type it exactly like it is, otherwise it won't accept your ID. And then this is the paper application that you got in the mail. You only need to fill this out if you're going to mail it in, or if you're going to have one of us help you do that. A couple of you have given those to me tonight to submit. But just put your name right there. Your landowner ID goes right here. Again, if you prefer email, you can check this over here and put your email right there. And then once they process your application, you'll get an email saying that your permits are ready. Otherwise, you'll get a letter in the mail that says your permits are ready to acquire. And then down here, if you are the landowner, you circle the landowner. Anybody else is a hunter, and then you put their name, date of birth, conservation number, and the number of permits that you want to give them, up to 10. So make sure they add up to 10. Now, I said this takes 2 weeks to process. So if you want to use these for archery season, you got to get your application in by September 1st. If you don't need them till firearms season, by October 28th. And then alternative methods is December 9th. So be aware of those deadlines so that you get those permits before you need them for hunting season. You can submit them at any time, but you want to get them in by those dates to meet the deadline. Like I said, you'll receive a letter or an email letting you know that you can access those permits after they've been processed. And then you can go to any vendor, like if you buy your permits at Walmart or a bait and tackle shop or a gas station, if you buy them on the Mow Hunting app, the website, at a conservation office, you can still get these permits at any of those locations. But before those show up, you have to acquire a regular permit for that season. So if you are a landowner with 20 or more contiguous acres, you get free landowner permits. So before your CWD landowner permits will show up on any of those systems, you have to get your landowner permit first. If you don't have 20 contiguous acres, then you'll have to buy a permit for the season in which you're going to hunt. So if you're going to hunt archery season, you have to buy an archery permit first, and then the CWD management permit can be acquired. If you're going to hunt firearms, you have to have a firearms any deer permit. Non-residents can also purchase the permit. It just costs them $265 to use your permits, so be aware of that. These permits, again, valid from September 15th to January 15th. So after January 15th, you have to call us and get signed up for the winter operations, and that's a whole different ball of wax. So, for these management permits during the regular season, you cannot bait, you cannot hunt at night, but you can harvest a buck or a doe. Even if it's antlerless season, you can still harvest a buck. There's no bag limits during this. But you do have to use the method of the season in which you're hunting. So if it's archery season, you have to use archery methods. If it's alternative method season, you have to use those methods. If it's firearm season, you have to use firearm. So just be aware of that. So whatever season you're hunting, you have to use that method, but you can kill a buck or a doe. Now, these permits are not transferable, and if you apply for some for other family members or friends, they are not going to get that letter or that email address, or that email to them saying the permits are ready. You're going to have to let them know that once you get the email or letter, and then they can go get their CWD permits. When you go to purchase these CWD management permits, there's going to be a box with a quantity. It's automatically auto-filled with the number 1. But if you want 5 permits, that's how many you applied for, you'll have to tell the person at the vendor, I get 5 CWD management permits. Otherwise, you'll get 1, and you'll drive home, and you'll be like, they don't give me 1 permit. So if you are supposed to get 5, make sure you tell them 5 so they can type in 5, and it prints out all 5 of them. Okay? So just, that's a little nuance you need to be aware of. Now, if you get your deer tested, which we highly recommend, you can fill out a reimbursement form for up to $75. You do have to have your receipts or a record of your time if you self-process your deer, but then you have to get it tested. So during opening weekend of firearm season, November 11th and 12th, it's mandatory that you go to one of our check stations. They're the same places they have been, only this year we have them in Bolivar County too. So it depends on where you're hunting. You can take them to several different places. If you are hunting other than that, you can bring them to any of the conservation offices or their staff, or you can take them to a head drop freezer. We have head drop freezers right up here at the St. Genevieve Dairy Queen parking lot. We'll have one at the Farmington Conservation Office, the Perryville Conservation Office, and then at the Festus Crystal City Conservation Club. And so for those, you'll cut the deer's head off, and we need to be able to cut right across their Adam's apple or their voice box. So make sure you cut 2 or 3 inches at least below that so that we can get a sample out of that deer. So you'll cut the head off, and then all the instructions and the forms you need to fill out in the bags are right there in the freezer, and you just drop it in there. We come by and pick those up and get your deer tested. It takes a couple of weeks depending on the time of year and how many deer. After opening weekend, we're swamped because we've had to collect them all over the state for the most part. But then it's, it might take less time before that or after that, depending on whenever you're going. We also have participating taxidermists and meat processors, and you can find those freezer head drop locations on our website. You can find a lot of these participating taxidermists and meat processors in that book or online as well. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, if we purchase a antlerless tag for the regular season, does that open us to take a buck and an Orado with the management tags?
No,
Yes. Yes. It does not need to be in any deer permit.
but he said if he buys an antlerless tag.
Then he can use the CWD management permit.
Yes, I thought you
Tag
meant,
to take a buck?
yes, but you have to use your CWD management permit.
Yes. Okay.
But you can, to activate it, you can buy the antlerless, yes. I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
And then I can take a buck during the antlerless portions as long as I use the methods prescribed during
Correct.
that season?
Correct.
And you have that, and you have a management permit.
Yes, if I have a management.
Yes.
Using the management.
Yes.
Correct. Yes, sir.
The management permits, you also said they are good for the early season, it's in October,
Yes,
so.
yes.
Like I
September,
said, you can wait till the 20th of October, but you want to have your
right,
permits before the October season if you want to use them.
correct. Yeah, I just took this information off of the packet they sent you, but you're correct. They added new seasons, and so if you want them for that early firearms antlerless season, you do have to have them in earlier. Any other questions for me? Like they said, I will be around, and if you fill out that form tonight and you want me to process it, like submit it in the computer, I can do that for you. Did you have a question?
If you take the time, if you're comfortable filling it out online, using the permit, the data you enter this year will pop up next year. So when you says enter your landowner ID, you just click on the box, and if you have multiple properties, you just pick which one.
Correct. You still have to enter each person's name and conservation number, but you don't have to enter your own information.
And the names will start popping up for the people that you want. It's handy.
Yes,
At the end of the presentation, we'll put up a number that you guys can call too if you get in there and you start running into issues. We've got a hotline number that goes straight into our Cape Girardeau office, and usually Sarah or some of our staff there that are really up to speed on this can answer, and then they'll help you through it too. So we're happy to help you figure it out. It can be somewhat cumbersome for some folks, and we're happy to help you through it. All right.
any other questions? Yes,
Do you feel that you're getting somewhere with the CWD management, or you just doing the best you can, working at it a little bit?
We're doing the best we can, I can promise you that. We are getting somewhere in that we're not completely just losing ground. I do believe 100% that we're slowing the spread of this disease to some degree. What level, I'm probably not able to answer that, but I do know that doing nothing will not help us at all. And we would be making less progress than we are. Are we stopping this? Are we fixing this to where it's going to be gone in a few years? No. Are we slowing the spread of this disease? Are we doing what we can to keep it from moving further out? I believe we're doing everything we can. We could do better probably if we could get more cooperation and get additional deer harvested, especially around areas that we know we have positives. Anytime we can remove more positive deer, we're making good progress. But we all know, everyone in this room knows, that's be a lot easier if the positive ones glow red, and we knew which ones they were. So that's the challenge here, right? And that's all we're trying to do is create opportunities for folks to get out there, remove deer, hopefully remove those positive deer. And in doing that, we are slowing the spread of this disease. I do believe that. I wouldn't be standing up here if I didn't believe it. But excellent question, because absolutely, I'm standing here and say, oh, we're 3 more years, guys. No, 30 more years. It's a battle. It's going to be a battle. So, yes, sir.
Are the testing stations going to be open for the early October?
Yes. Yep. You're talking, no, wait. Testing stations. Head drop freezers will be
Yes.
open. We will have head drop freezers out to be opening day of archery season, right, Keith?
It's the forestry station in Perryville, will that be open?
It's only open November 11th and 12th.
There will always be somebody at the Perryville office that can help you take a sample.
Right.
Okay, right,
Except for
The head drop freezer's there, it's pretty clear on how to do it, but,
okay.
yeah, we'll help you as best we can to get deer samples, but those head drop freezers are really helpful. And we do have a pretty, I mean, I appreciate you all because we do have really good participation when it comes to head drop freezers. When you compare what we're getting in our head drop freezers versus everywhere else in the state, we're doing a really good job. So folks are concerned, right? Folks want to get their deer tested. I 100% agree. I'd get your deer tested. It will take some time. Sometimes, like Sarah said, you bring that thing in the day before opening day of firearms deer season, all of a sudden we go from, 30,000 deer get sampled in those 2 days. It's going to bog us down a little bit. But shoot that deer, get that head drop in that head drop freezer, keep that meat from that deer separate from all the other deer, separate all your deer, freeze it, whatever you got to do with it, debone it, however you want to deal with it, but just keep those deer separate, because the worst thing I do is when I go in and say, hey, I need to talk to you about a positive deer, and you're like, well, here's all the deer I've shot this season, and they're all stacked together. And then we've got to make a decision, do we just take all that meat, or do you take a chance on eating one of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, whatever deer stacked in that group? So keep your deer separate until you get those results back, and we'll get them back as fast as we can. Yes, sir.
Chronic wasting after the season, the late season. If you prefer to choose the process deer itself, is it $75 still there?
No. The postseason stuff, and the January 16th through.
Well, I sure my grandson got a deer, turned it in and had it all processed, and got 30 pounds of meat. I thought that was terrible. Deer would not give a shot right through the heart,
Right.
no bother.
So I will tell you, and I'll vouch for Sonny's because I work with them, I work with Tyson ever since we started this. When they bring those deer in, we're shooting deer a lot of times when it's still pretty warm, they gotta get there. There are some times when they're probably cutting off a little bit more meat than they normally would, just because they wanna make sure they're getting good meat and they're not giving you bad meat. So there are some instances where I think we're probably giving you back a little bit less deer than you might get in November, because they're being fairly precautious with the meat that they're processing. So I would say for the most part, we've had some instances where folks are like, hey man, my deer was a lot bigger than this.
Yes.
And I 100% understand that. If you feel like you're getting short, let us know. We'll try to help you out, or at least what we do is I think we're docking every deer that comes in, and we've had times where we've been able to go back and talk to Stoney's. Keith Cordell back there is direct Fox Hill specialist. He works with Stoney's every day. He'll go back and they a lot of times can kind of give you, oh, that deer came in, here's what happened, and give you some. So I apologize if that's the case. Again, that's all on us. So we're giving you that meat, but I realize there's time invested and effort invested on your end that you would like to get it.
Shot late evening, 2 acres for waiting at the house.
Right.
It went straight there,
Yep.
and that was not shot through the hands, the shoulders, and right through the heart.
Right.
30 pounds, I felt not right.
Well, and I apologize. There's been a few instances like that. Again, we're pretty fortunate too in that we're one of the few places where we bring deer in, we do what we have to do with them to get the samples, and we literally drive them across the street to Stoney's and put them in a cooler. And so the process to get them there is pretty efficient. And we come and get deer as quick as we can and get them moved. But there are instances where folks I think are probably getting less deer than they wanted. For example, I'm not going to argue that.
But if I chose to process that deer, can I do that?
You can, yes, you can process deer yourself.
You just don't get the $75.
Yeah, you just don't
Right,
get any money for it.
you don't get
Right,
reimbursed
but
for
you
it.
absolutely can process that deer yourself.
And you have to take the head to
We still come and sample it. So you'll call us, you'll say, hey, I'm gonna process that yourself. We'll say, fantastic, we're gonna send somebody there, they're gonna sample it. And then you're gonna take the deer and process it yourself, and we're gonna get the sample.
one more thing, it's not.
And that's during the winter operation, not during season.
And he wanted to handle it, but they said they weren't nothing monster, but he wanted. He cut them off, level with it. You could knock down and get in, they just cut them. So that, if anybody's interested, that's where you go.
Yeah, we don't really like for you to skull plate deer because it's a good chance of neurological disease getting into that brain cavities.
But you could just cut them right off.
I think we've allowed that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we just don't want to expose the brain.
Oh, yeah, there we go. You can't be in.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
How soon do you get into a presumptive field test, so you get your results back either immediately or?
We're getting there. No, I mean, I don't think it's gonna be in the next year or two, but we are, a lot of what we're doing, we are coming and getting deer and taking blood samples from deer, from these, especially from St. John County, and working with MU and several folks at University of Missouri and folks, other states, to try to develop a test that will be, I don't know, Keith, can you explain, maybe like a litmus test where you basically just get some blood from that deer and
That's the goal, but it's
still a ways away.
That's what we're trying to get, but it's not reliable yet.
And we've made some great, I mean, if we can have our, that's one thing we talked about, have our veterinarian come up here and explain some of that. Only problem is when she starts explaining it, I understand the first like 30 seconds and then all of a sudden it's like, woo, over my head. But it's really cool stuff because we have made some really good grounds on that front, but we're still ways out.
Missouri's also not the only state working on that either. Yeah, I mean, this is an international issue now.
All right, so let's move on to AJ's presentation. AJ Hendershot's our regional supervisor for education, worked on CWD for as long as any of us here in the region, but he's going to come up and give you some results from our winter operations this last year.
All right. We have done some focus group studies with various people from St. Genevieve and Jefferson County. We've also sent out some postcards asking what's your opinion on this and that. Something that we've heard loud and clear is that you really cannot over-communicate what you're doing on this CWD stuff. There's a lot of information out there, but there's also a lot of misinformation out there. So what we're here to do tonight is to talk a little bit about what we did last year or even the previous several years. We want to be an open book within reason. If you're interested in how many deer we've killed, how many fawns, how many bucks, how many does, I'm going to go over that tonight. So I'm going to talk about some of our local CWD data. I'm not going to talk about other parts of the state. It's going to be right here down in our backyard. I'm going to talk a little bit about share the harvest because that's a neat story that's worth telling. And then I'm going to focus a lot on what hunters can do because that's based on some information we've gotten from the public and their interest. So, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the different ways we sampled CWD. Right here is our deer season, September 15, January 15. This is all the testing that has happened through the mandatory firearms weekend and the voluntary head drop with the freezers. Now, if there's a deer that's harvested during this time period that's not sampled, it's not represented on this list. But I want you to notice that in 2016, that was our first time to get a CWD positive in our region. And as time went on, you notice that it pretty well stayed pretty level, but then all of a sudden it pops up to 3 and 6 and 6. That's not the direction we want this to go. That's a mild climb. But if you look at the number of deer that are being harvested in the county versus the number of deer that are showing up as positive, we're still looking at in the neighborhood of 1 to 2%. And that's really not bad. What I mean by that is you have a 99% chance of harvesting a deer that is CWD negative. Those are pretty good odds. You go to Wisconsin, certain counties, you have a 50-50 chance of harvesting a deer that's negative. Which means by the other side, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting one that's positive. I don't like those odds. I like 99. All right, so over here in this next column is our winter operation. This is not hunting, it's management. We hunt at night, we use bait, we do things that we're not allowed to do during the regular season. And what we're trying to do is we don't do the whole county. We're trying to zero in, get down real close to where those positives are, and hunt around that. And when I say hunt, we're trying to harvest deer, take them out of the population, and the whole philosophy is, if we focus in like that, and we get that population to, or get those positive deer out, you have fewer positive or infected deer moving out of that population to other parts of the county. Now, because you probably have good habitat, or you wouldn't have deer there anyways, what's going to happen is deer are going to move around the county, and they're going to come into where you are, and because they are not infected, they're healthy, so more of the deer in your area are, again, negative. They don't have CWD. That's the point of the winter management, is to dial in, get a few more deer off the landscape that are positive. Wish they glowed, but they don't. All right, so we also pick up roadkills from time to time where someone calls us and says, we have a deer that's sick, Yeah, what you got?
You're doing Jefferson County, I'm looking at the paperwork in St. Genevieve County, 2021-22 had 14.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that.
Okay, so we're doing Jefferson first.
Yeah, I'm just doing Jefferson. Yeah,
Gotcha.
we're getting there.
Sorry for interrupting.
Not a problem. I'm glad you asked. Okay, so we did have a deer that we checked out was positive. So if someone calls us, says, I have a deer, it's not acting right, or we just found one, he's emaciated, looks terrible, sounds like he might have that CWD, we're gonna collect it, we're gonna test it, dispose of the body, and then we'll figure out what caused that animal to die. Sometimes it's CWD, sometimes it's not. So I'm not gonna belabor that, we'll go to the next slide. Here's St. Genevieve. Okay, so this is probably more of what you're looking for, but because they're attached. All right, so deer season, here's what's being sampled for, 7-6, all the way down a couple years ago, 14 and 17. And we have some areas where we know there's a lot of deer within the county. It's not just all over the county, it's very specific locations where we have this. Again, this is not the direction we're hoping for. We don't want to see this line moving up. But at the same time, it's not as bad as it could be, because we are doing something that keeps this number from just rocketing up. If we did absolutely nothing, I promise you that number would start to go up in a big way. So if you look at the winter operation, we're coming in and we are harvesting deer. We're getting some that are positive. We're getting them off the landscape. They're being removed. Nobody gets that meat to go straight to the dumpster. We're not taking a chance with it. Again, road killing sick deer, we have a few of those. We have another detached core in Perry County. There are sections of the St. Genevieve core that's in Perry County, but this one's all by itself. And this one we had one deer. It may be a one-off. We're going to do just a little more research on that just to make sure that we're statistically sound, and then our hope is we're going to close that one down. Hopefully that was just one deer. We detected it, got it early. It's not on the landscape. Okay. Now, if you've ever worked with us, you know that we take a look at the jaw of the deer. I'm not going to get into this a whole lot, just to say we use the teeth to figure out how old is this deer. We have 3 categories that we put these deer in. A fawn, a yearling, which means 1.5 years, or an adult, which is 2.5 years old or older. So 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, so on. All those in that adult category. So we're going to take a look at the teeth, the number of cusps, so forth, where they are in the lineup, and that means something to us. So here's our data from last year's winter operation. This is not the hunting season. This is the winter management that happens for 2 months with your cooperation. So in Jefferson County, 45, 38, 96. St. Gen, 32, 44, 189. Perry, 1, 2, and 2. So you can see that we are harvesting a little bit of everything, but here's the deal. As the landowner, if you tell us, I don't mind if you come on, I'm going to authorize you to harvest 5 deer, but I don't want you to kill a big buck. We're probably going to ask, what do you mean by big buck? Over 6 points on each side, what are we talking? Once we understand that, we do what you tell us. That's your choice. If you say you can kill whatever comes in, we're going to try to take a community around that positive. So if there's a family group that we think is possibly infected, we're going to try to take that family group out. However, if you tell us to do something different, we're going to do something different. You are in control. All right, so now I've got a bunch of numbers up here. What I'm really focusing on is the red numbers. Those are the positives. If you look at who shows up as a positive, we have one over here that is a fawn female. It was positive in Jefferson County. You look over here, we had a yearling male. It was positive. And then no others in Jefferson County through the winter management turned up positive. In St. Genevieve County, the story's a little different. We had a positive female, 3 of them, and then positive males, 4. Perry Core, keep doing that. No positives in that area. We're hopeful that continues. All right, so 2023, winter operations, buck doe. If you just want to summarize that, Jefferson County, certainly more does than bucks. Some of that has to do with population that you're working in. Maybe you have more does, and there's more does available to come up, or it may be landowner wishes. But in Jefferson County, majority of the deer that are taken during that time period are taken by landowners, not by NBC shooters. So it's really their choice. St. Genevieve County, a little different, a little bigger number on the does, Perry County, so forth. Again, it boils down to those 9 deer during the winter management. We got 9 extra deer off the landscape with CWD. So that's pure to infect the landscape and other deer. Now, something positive. So we test every deer. If it's positive, it goes straight to the dumpster. If, however, we test it and it's negative, that goes back to the landowner. If you've worked with us, you know how that works. However, there are some people that say, you know what, I've got enough meat in the freezer, I'm good if you just donate that to share the harvest. That is a program where we take the meat and we give it to a food pantry in the county. And then they're going to use that for anybody who needs the food. Here's an additional really good thing. We take some of that meat and we have it made into snack sticks. Donnie is a part of this program, and those snack sticks go into a backpack program for school kids. If a student qualifies for free and reduced lunches, that means they get breakfast and lunch at school 5 days a week. Well, what do they get on the weekend? Maybe nothing. So they get a backpack from the school, and it has snacks in it that will take them through Saturday and Sunday, and in there are venison sticks from what we're doing here in St. Genevieve, Perry, and Jefferson County. Now, I don't like CWD, but this process is leading to a positive result here, and I do like kids, and I really like the idea that the kids are getting something to eat out of this process. So you look at the numbers, 182 deer, 2,000 pounds of it, over that much went toward the snack sticks, and that's well over 3,000 pounds of deer meat total. So that's a pretty impressive story. We're turning something that is a negative story about CWD, but we're turning it into something positive. We're feeding people who need something to eat.
Is that strictly from the winter?
Yes. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the hunting season that normally people donate to. Yeah. Okay, so here's something else we heard from the public. We asked you, so what are your thoughts on the winter management? A lot of people said, I'd rather do it during the regular hunting season. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because I like that idea. Hunting is the best way for us to identify where do we have CWD. But it's also a management tool if we zero in like we're trying to do with the winter management. We're trying to get those deer off the landscape. If you don't get them off the landscape, it's infecting and it's potentially spreading down the road. So that's what we're trying to do. If you want to try to do that through your hunting process because it appeals to you, I don't have a bit of problem with that. Love to work with you on that, but understand what you're signing up for. Let's talk about that. So let's look at the whole state of Missouri. I have data that indicates that if you look at the number of people that buy a hunting permit for deer, whether it's archery or firearms, 90% harvest between 0 and 1 deer. Let me break that down just a little bit. 60% harvest 0. 30% harvest 1. And then 7% harvest 2. And then the 3% that's left, harvest 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and so on. And I'm sure some of you know people that harvest a number of deer. They are in the top 1%. People just don't harvest a lot of deer. Now, we are offering these landowner management permits, and we're asking you to harvest more deer around those positives. Now, each individual, maybe that's not something you individually each want to do, but if a number of people were to do that, it helps a lot. So here's what we're asking people to do. Get your deer tested voluntarily. Obviously, there's an ethic for this. We're doing great in this region, but we could do more. So get your deer tested. During those voluntary, we've got the head drops. If you know that you're near a positive, we're encouraging you to work with us and do some of that. Harvest more deer. And I'm asking, can you harvest one more? Individually, can you harvest one more? Or if you've got a family or a group of friends and you all hunt there, if everybody were to harvest or try for one more, we have the potential to get more deer off the landscape that have CWD. Now, I want you to understand, we are not trying to get rid of deer permanently or at all. Luke's going to talk in a little bit about deer management. And that's our way of saying we want deer on the landscape. We want deer moving into where you are. We want healthy deer coming in, which they will, but we don't want infected deer moving out. We want them off the landscape completely. All right, so what can hunters do? If you're doing what I just said on the previous slide, we take that into account. We're going to look at a piece of property and say, yeah, this person right here harvested 10 deer off their property. We may not call you and ask for a whole lot of deer off your property during winter operations, or we may not call you first or at all, because you're already doing what we need done. Now, if that person is not harvesting a lot of deer, we're gonna call, and we do that because we're real serious about trying to address this disease. This is the best thing you can do. I don't like CWD, but I think this is the best thing we're doing. So the winter management, we're still gonna do this for the foreseeable future, but if you're doing more on your property, we may not have to work with you during that winter management. Something to think about. So with that, Luke is gonna come up and talk a little bit about management. I want you to understand that as a deer hunter, I hate CWD, I don't like it. I can imagine most of you in here are not happy about it either. You don't like it, you don't want to run your property. I don't blame you. So this is something that I really feel like is the best thing we can do, and we're doing something positive with the meat that goes to share the harvest. With that, turn it back over. Matt?
Any questions for AJ, or?
I got a question. I don't know if you can answer it. So you have a test that shows the deer have or don't have CWD. Do you have a test that shows they have the antibodies to not get the disease? Or that they have already had the disease and recovered?
That's an interesting question. What we understand about CWD is it is 100% fatal. So if you get it, there is no recovery. So if you get this disease, you are eventually going to deteriorate to the point that if you do not succumb to something else, and I'll explain what I mean by that, you are going to eventually get to the point where you're not feeding yourself and you're going to waste away. Now, most of these animals, because they are getting spongy holes in their brain, they do not behave the way normal deer should. So when they approach a road, they're not looking both ways, they're not paying attention like a good deer should, they get road killed more often. They get attacked by predators more often, and they just do dumb things that end up getting them killed. So we know that CWD infected animals, they become roadkill more often. We've seen that in several different states. We are not aware of anything that would be an antibody to get rid of that because you're not dealing with an organism that's infecting the deer. This is a misfolded protein. It's already identified in the body as part of you, or part of the deer. So that's really a tricky thing, and figuring out how do we deal with that is a huge question. And that's what comes next. We're trying to figure out through a lot of these research projects, what do we do about this? It just hasn't shown up yet.
I'm just a dumb redneck. They know whether you had COVID or not.
Right. So you're talking about diseases that are caused by viruses and bacteria, which are like the majority of the diseases that we deal with are caused by. Which what we're talking about is something called a misfolded protein, which is something like your body's already producing. It just gets misfolded and then multiplies, and it's completely different from that. So when you look at, I always butcher this, but Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, which is CJD in humans, it's the same type of disease as CWD. It is irreversible. There's no way to get, once you find out you have that disease, you're going to die. Because it's the exact same, but it's not caused by bacteria, it's not caused by a virus that we can figure out how to fight. So that makes it very complicated. And you may be, you said it, but it's hard for us to understand too, and it's hard for us as scientists to study this disease because it's very slow progressing, whether it's in humans or sheep or scrapian sheep or CWD in deer, or whatever it is, and whatever species these same types of diseases, families of diseases are impacting, it happens very slowly and it's hard to really focus on and study.
I understand that, it's hard to figure out a way to administer something to the wild animals to keep them from getting it.
They've done studies where they've developed what they thought was a vaccine, and so they've injected that into deer in controlled environments, and those deer, in some cases, have died faster than deer that wouldn't have been injected. It worked in the opposite order. So they're trying to develop that as much as they possibly can, but right now they're not making a lot of ground. So it's a very hard thing to.
I understand that it would be, even if you found something.
Yeah.
It would be,
hey, if we could,
but
that's a huge.
All I want to know is if some of these deer may possess the ability to not ever get the disease, then we're killing them.
Right. Everything we know about.
Pass on to the farms.
And if we.
And that's a valid concern.
Eventually, it'll get rid of itself.
Yeah. If that was the case, it would be an issue, but.
It's being studied across this country. Whitetail deer make up, they're the number one hunted species of animal out there in the country.
Right.
every state is studying this, trying to figure out that if we can figure out that what we're doing is counterproductive, then we would reverse that. But right now, there's no way that nothing points to these deer being resilient to the disease. Right? Every deer that gets the disease eventually dies, from everything we know. So that's the
I
downfall.
understand if they get it, but
Right.
I just don't understand how you know for sure that they may not get it because of their immune system. May not get it.
There's nothing showing that an immune system prevents them from getting it. What would prevent them from getting it would be not encountering the disease, period. It's transferable from deer to deer. We know it transfers from deer to deer. If there's less deer out there that have it, it makes sense that less of them will get it, right? But there's nothing that says that if a deer comes in contact and those prions are exchanged, that it's transferable and that both those deer will die. There's just nothing that shows us right now that they will.
Matt said as well, that the disease is unstudied enough at this point too, that even in those areas where these winter management activities are happening, these extra harvests of deer during the season is happening, or where it's not happening, there's not enough long-term data trend information yet to justify, look at this population, it's weird that number stabilized and then dropped to where they can say, maybe there's an issue with, or maybe there's something about those deer that we need to look at. Everywhere where they're not doing anything, that number keeps going up. Wisconsin's been mentioned, Alberta, Tennessee has like 18% prevalency rate in some counties, and it just keeps going up. So there's a lot we don't know about it, especially in this room, let alone at that higher level on the disease side of things.
But everything points to it always increasing if we don't know. So, Keith, do you want to speak to any of that? He's kind of our expert as far as the.
No, it's just a very hard disease to wrap your head around, but it's not, it doesn't cause an immunologic response, it doesn't cause a fever, it doesn't make you sick. The proteins keep replicating until they accumulate enough in the brain to cause brain damage, and then the deer dies. So young deer can keep reproducing, but you just don't see the old deer. They're gonna fall out at the end.
Okay, I was just trying to clarify, because I heard that basically they were saying, like, if you see a sick deer that looks like it's got CWD, you're not allowed to shoot it. Is that correct? Or if
Call your conservation agent or the department. We do want to take that animal out. They may authorize you and say, "Do you still see it?" And if the answer is yes, they may say, "Go ahead and harvest it." Somebody's going to come by and pick up the animal so we can get it tested.
Okay, because I'm just saying, it's like, if I just wanted to make sure, because it's like, because I mean, you never know, like, you don't know how long that animal's going to be.
We've had several deer called in that were sick that we've authorized people to take out, or, Rob Scousker, County Agent here at St. John, will authorize folks pretty quickly to take a deer out that's sick. And the biggest thing is, if we know about it, then we'll come sample it. But the thing is, lots of things kill deer, so it's not always CWD, just because you see a sick one doesn't always. The problem with CWD is when you start seeing sick deer that are CWD positive, then we have prevalency rates that's really shooting up. So Wisconsin, I was just in Wisconsin this spring, their prevalency rates are upwards of 50% in Iowa County, and I talked to a biologist there, and she said they get calls every day of sick deer, and almost every one of those deer are positive for CWD. So, and they're seeing a much higher rate. Here, we're still finding deer that are, they've got some brain abscess, or they've got a bad tooth or something that has nothing to do with CWD. So luckily, we're in a good spot as far as that goes.
So basically, I pretty much have to get permission from the conservation department.
Yeah, outside the season, now if you're in the season, you can take that deer and then call an agent and tell them, hey, it's a sick deer, we can come out and look at it, maybe,
Get you another permit.
get you another permit or whatever.
Okay. Allowing the public to do that also opens the gate for John Smith to shoot the 190-inch deer in velvet that is not sick at all.
You just said it was sick.
Yeah, it looked sick, so I shot it, but when really nothing was wrong with it.
All right, so Luke Weymouth is our private lands conservationist. He's got just a real short kind of presentation here, just talk about some of the opportunities that are out there. When he gets done, if you got a question for Luke, we'll come back up. We got other questions. We'll wrap this up and send everybody home. So Luke.
Yep, so like Matt said, I'm the PLC in St. John, Perry County. Luckily for me, both of my counties are riddled with this. A lot of these meetings, everybody's been coming to them for a couple of years. We really import the CWD information on everybody. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of information, a lot of updates, things like that. One of the things we're trying to incorporate into this, like Matt mentioned earlier in the meeting, was that MDC is not just CWD. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more opportunity for landowners, especially. I know there's folks in this room that have worked with it. where folks like myself are employed solely to help answer questions, form management plans for property management, habitat management, increase deer numbers, turkey numbers, quail numbers, whatever your interest is, we're willing to help you with it. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover here. Also, we were going over a lot of numbers before. Now it's going to be a whole bunch of new acronyms, so good luck with that because I'm still struggling with it. Purposes of financial incentives on your private property is to change the way the land is being managed to enhance conservation. A lot of times this is a land use change. For example, CRP, which I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with, is changing ag ground or some pasture or stream corridors into more suitable native habitat. Missouri's 97% privately owned, so this is a way for MDC and other farm bill programs essentially to incentivize habitat management on your property. There's a couple different types of financial assistance, different cost share programs, rental and easement payments, and some of these also act as an incentive to kind of help alleviate a lot of that cost, but the incentive comes in where those prices are a little bit higher to really incentivize getting that great work done in those areas. These financial programs are a tool. They are not a way to make money. A lot of the misconception is that, hey, I'm going to enroll this, not touch it for 15 years, I'm going to get a sweet payment off of it, and it's going to be great. That is not the point of it. The point of it is to meet with someone like myself, a consultant, whether it's a forester, a PLC, a biologist, someone with NRCS for soil and water, and to form a management plan for your property. What's best for your area, what actually would work in your area. If your goals are turkey, what can we do to improve the turkey habitat on your property, deer, in this case especially deer, what can we do to incentivize deer to come to that property rather than just be in a soybean field for 3 or 4 months. Your consultant, whether it's someone like myself or someone with soil and water NRCS, is going to work with you to determine what financial assistance would really qualify on your property. What programs are you even eligible for? A lot of these programs are land type specific, like CRP or WRE. NRCS programs, there's a sign-up period that only lasts so long. If you don't get it in that time, you have to wait a whole other calendar year. And if it's something like MDC's, it's capped, or the funds are capped. So there's a pot of money. When it's gone, it's gone. We got to roll it over to that following year. Your planner is going to be the person who works through this with you. A lot of times, when I'm working with landowners, it's multiple cost share programs we're working with. It's not just one silver bullet. You don't just come to MDC, get some money, you're done with it. It may be better to come to MDC for a year and then work with NRCS. You may have higher payments for a longer term, more quote-unquote guaranteed payout. And then also to work with the funds that are available, essentially. They'll also put you in contact with the appropriate agency, whether it is MDC or NRCS. When you're forming a management plan with this consultant or whoever your contact is, their main purpose is to make sure that whatever plan you come up with is accurately outlined. There are clear and concise objectives to what you're going to be doing, what needs to be done, and what we recommend doing. Making sure you guys are doing the right work in the right place, not trying to build a wetland on top of a ridge, things like that. Making sure that we're implementing the proper management practices on your property so that we achieve those goals that you have. And I already said it, making sure we got a good time schedule. A lot of times, I'll meet with folks, they just bought 100 acres, they're wanting to make it the next Drury Outdoors Green Paradise. I'm going to throw everything with the kitchen sink at it the first year. That ain't going to happen. Your back's going to give out, you'll be in the hospital if you try and do all that in the first year. So your consultant's job is to kind of slow you down a little bit, put you in more of a better, manageable time frame so that you're getting good work done and you're not killing yourself in the process. I already mentioned it, CRP is a very familiar program in all of Missouri and nationwide realistically. It stands for Conservation Reserve Program. WRE, or what used to be WRP, is also wrapped up in that. We don't have a lot of that in these counties. That would be the Wetland Reserve Program or Wetland Reserve Easement. That is another program like CRP. You have to have a farming background on it or some kind of wetland background as well. NRCS Cost Share Program, for short, is called EQIP, mainly because we don't like saying Environmental Quality Incentives Program every time we talk about it. MDC's Cost Share Program, just like EQIP, is called LCAP, Landowner Conservation Assistance Program. EQIP and LCAP are very much alike The only difference is that MDC has a little bit different verbiage for their programs, and we're capped by funds. So we have an annual rollover, I'll get into in a little bit. Equip is a little bit higher payment rate, but the length of time in which you can take that payment out is strung out over a period of time. I've already talked on CRP a little bit. These programs are 10 to 15 year stints on an annual per acre payment. In most cases, it's very relative to crop rental payments. Granted, that does not factor in any kind of crop share, more or less, on what the farmer makes on that property. But most times it is comparable to your acre rent payments. The main purpose for CRP is converting farmland to native habitat. This is an example. You'll notice in the background there's a nice pretty bean field. This field right here was the same way before. It's a smaller field, about 8 to 10 acres. There was a lot of deer depredation issues on it. The farmer could not keep crop, or couldn't get crop off of it essentially. Went to his FSA office, enrolled in CP 38, which is the Bob White Quail program. Now he has a huge diverse population out there. There's bunch grasses for quail to nest in. There's areas for fawns to bed, browse for deer. Forbs are great for turkeys because it produces a lot of bugs, which are a huge food source for poults, which is a very hot topic right now. So that 8 to 10 acres is producing a lot more for wildlife for that 10 to 15 years than that bean field ever would. Not to mention it offers a lot of cover during hunting season, so you're not hunting over 180 acres of stubble. This is another example of CP21. It's essentially just filter strips along field borders. Kind of gives you a little bit of edge habitat between hardwoods, straight back to field. It's a really good travel corridor or staging area. A lot of folks like to call that for deer to come out into the field. This one, when we do, as you can see, this farmer or landowner has T-posts along there. A lot of times, the CP21s, farmer will take another row about every year, something like that, and then by the time it comes time for re-enrollment, there's not a strip there anymore. The strip's gone. It's now been planted back over the last 10 to 15 years. Equip is NRCS's program. Like I already mentioned, is a, I didn't already mention it. Essentially, it's fixed payments for specific practices. So where CRP, you're getting a per acre payment per year to do management work. This is a fixed payment for one practice. So if you do a native pollinator planting habitat, you get paid once for that practice and that's it. Once it's planted and checked out, that's done. There is a lifespan incorporated with that where you have to keep that land, that planting for so many years, whatever it is for the different programs that are out there or practices that are out there. The payments are based on a lot of times what the cost of that installation is, whether it's seed cost, herbicide cost, contractor cost, things like that. The LCAP and Equip dockets are multiple pages long with several practices on it. We do cover a lot of bases. Anything you want to do for habitat management on that project and then some is on those dockets. Those contracts last anywhere from 2 to 10 years. And what that essentially means is that your planner will work with you to form in this case, a 10-year project. That project is going to have multiple practices lined out through it with dates when we recommend you do this. Again, going back to making sure you're doing enough work to perform great habitat management, but you're not killing yourself in the process. So that 10 years, if you've got 100 acres, you may cover that 100 acres, you may only cover 50 of it. It just kind of depends on what you're comfortable with doing, how you're going to go about doing that work, things of that nature. Equip is a competitive process right now with annual signups. We're kind of hoping to see that to where it becomes a rollover program where it's kind of a first come, first served basis. You go into the NRCS office, you sign up, within a week you're authorized to do that work. Right now, especially this time of year, if you were to go into the NRCS office and apply for it, you have to wait till October 30th when when they essentially have a cutoff on when you can put programs in or applications. They then rank all those through March. In March, you're notified if you were selected for your program payment. Then you have a year to essentially complete so many practices of that are in that 10-year plan. So right now, if you did it, you're not going to have any work on the ground until realistically next winter. Because by the time March rolls around, you're dealing with nesting ground birds, migration's kicking up songbirds. There's not really a lot of work you can do then other than prescribed fire. MDC's cost share, which I didn't put up here, again, is called LCAP. each region is allocated a specific amount of money, and when that money is allocated, it's gone. So a lot of times we don't ever hit that allocation cap. I know last year we didn't hit it. LCAP is also, well, I'll hit that in a minute, but the federal program of EQIP, which is very similar to LCAP, is a lot of times a better program to go into because the payments are a little bit higher. With that being a competitive annual sign-up though and having a sign-up period, we will utilize LCAP dollars to do some work that first year while you're waiting for your program to get approved, and then the EQIP will kick in. So a lot of these programs are interchangeable. Like I said, you're not just going to use one program most times, you'll use multiple programs. A lot of those cost share rates come out to about 50 to 90% cost share rate, and that's basically based off of nationwide prices on seed costs, fertilizer costs, herbicide costs, contractor costs, things like that. I already mentioned it's first come, first served basis. And if you're interested in any of this, you can contact anybody in MDC and they will get you in this county in contact with me, and then we'll work out a program for your property. Some of the smaller projects we do through LCAP would be like wildlife watering source. This is a 20-foot by 20-foot watering hole in the middle of the woods. I believe this one is in Iron County. A lot of people call and say, I want to put a pond on so my deer have somewhere to get a drink throughout the year. Realistically, in the Ozarks especially, the amount of money involved with putting a pond in, you're going to want to get a hold of somebody else. MDC is not going to have the cost share funds available. When you're talking about wildlife, you want something that's going to have a lot of ebb and flow, and it may dry out, but as soon as you get rain, it's going to fill back up. Keep them to this size helps make that attainable. Too far. This is an example of blade restoration. The top photo and the bottom photo are right after someone went in and cut all the cedars off of the blade. This is a program we offer cost share on, depending on where you're at. These payment rates can sometimes pay for the entire project, especially if we have any kind of a financial program going on that's outside of LCAP but through MDC. Once those blades are cleared off, prescribed fire performed on them, those blades end up looking like this. There's a lot more forward diversity out there, which again, going back to turkeys, offers a lot more bugs, a lot more food. There's a lot more browse available for deer. There's a lot more areas to nest. And what would have been straight up covered in cedars offers really nothing for wildlife. Deer will bed in it if that's all they have. Now you have a lot more you're offering for wildlife in terms of food, cover, things like that on your property, which, like AJ mentioned, is going to attract more deer and more turkeys onto your property. We do offer payment on green browse plots. A lot of times this payment rate is very low, but if you're already doing another project, it's good to tack this one on if you're already going to do it, because a lot of times it will cover your seed costs. Now in doing this, I've had some folks who, I'm going to do a green browse plot, they go to Buckeyes, buy the latest and greatest, big buck 95, whatever it is. We don't cover those costs. We come up with a specific seed mix that a lot of times is clover, grape, turnips, radishes, things that are more annual. The clover's not annual, but sometimes it will be more annual. Clover's an easy one because it's a repetitive. You can mow it down every year a couple times and it'll come back. Things that make more sense in the habitat rather than what you'll buy off the shelf. It's just an example of what you can turn any crop field into, more native habitat, again, offering more. Recently, I'm sure a lot of folks realize that the turkeys are kind of the hot topic right now. A lot of their numbers are dropping. One of the main practices we entice for turkey management is FSI. All of those cut trees on the ground offer so much more nesting habitat and escape cover for those poults and those hens than it would if it was just, you can see 300 yards through it. I got a bunch of big old trees. That doesn't offer much. Other forest management practices that we help with are prescribed fire. If you're doing some other projects on your property through EQIP or LCAP, we will come out and help mark timber for certain stands and make a timber harvest plan sort of for you. That way you're not just coming in and taking every marketable tree off the property and then letting it sit for 30 years. We like to stagger those off so that every 5, 10, 15 years you're going to get a check off of it, not just once every 30 or 40 years. Not to mention that staggering those out and thinning those trees out allows those trees to grow much girthier, essentially adding more board feet to what your payout would be your per load. Another great and wonderful thing that we offer cost share on is invasive species. I have not been on a property yet that doesn't have invasive species. If you have one, please let me know. I'd love to see it. but we offer some really good payment rates on invasive species, bush honeysuckle, Japanese honeysuckle. I'm sure everybody has seen Serratia before. Removing these invasive species not only helps other plants grow, but it offers a lot more. These don't offer anything as far as food cover for wildlife long term. What your native plants would offer is much more beneficial than any of these invasives would. In summary, there's a lot more to MDC than CWD. We do have a lot of cost share programs, and not even just cost share, we offer a lot of advice and help for those landowners who want to manage for better habitat on their property. Whether it's for deer, turkey, quail, butterflies, hummingbirds, whatever it is, we have the folks that can help you out. If you are interested in any of this, feel free to contact myself, any other MDC employee. You can go to your local USDA office, and an NRCS, soil and water, or FSA individual will be there to talk to you about these other programs as well. But the main takeaway is do something. Something is better than nothing, and in terms of habitat management, doing something more often helps out a lot more than just watching something grow and do nothing with it. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
You mentioned a lot of different programs. Do you manage every single one of them, or you can get us in contact with every single one?
I would love to say I don't, but in a way I do. My job as your consultant, in a sense, is to connect you with the individual who's best suited for your property. My job is to be a lot of the technical assistance. While I do a lot of the paperwork, I'm more of the boots on the ground work. What am I doing? When am I doing it? How am I doing it? These other individuals I would put you in contact with. For example, if you were going to do equip, or if I thought, you know what, your property is going to be better suited for equip due to the time length and the payout costs, I'm going to work with you on it, but I'm going to put you in contact with that individual at NRCS who's going to be a lot more versed in their verbiage and their acronyms and their whatever that I'm not necessarily up to beat on, essentially.
But we should start with you.
Yep, I'm a great place to start. At some point in the process, you're going to be involved with me anyways. If you don't, like I said, you can go to any USDA office or FSA office. They'll put you in contact with someone. If it's CRP related, I might help, but a lot of times that's kind of FSA's baby. Everything else, though, I'll most likely help you out on, though.
Probably one of the greatest positions we have as an agency. So I'm native of Illinois. We don't have private lands folks that work like this. So the MDC's got these folks in every county, or someone representing every county. They're in our NRCS offices. So if you need someone to start with, our PLCs are a great place. If you're in any of the counties, just reach out to the Loop, or you can reach out to our regional office down in Cape. We'll put you in contact with the right person. But they are a great position to get you in contact, and a lot of times you're going to work right with them. And I'm sure several folks in this room, I know just looking out there, have worked with our PLCs.
We're not knowing what you want to do to start with. It's
Right, great place to start, right?
And
Right out of the gate for us.
Yeah.
We're trying to put habitat on the ground.
And out of the gate, it's free. You can get a hold of a private consultant. They're going to charge anywhere from $400 to $600 to come out and even talk to you. You call me, I'm going to show up, shake your hand, and leave when we're done. So the only time the dollar gets involved is when we start talking cost share programs. And again, they're cost share. So there will be some out-of-pocket expense, but the whole thought process is that getting involved with these programs is going to cut that by anywhere from 50 to 90%.
Any other questions for Luke?
I do have a landowner workshop sign-up sheet on the table that you guys walked in, or walked by when you came in. We are going to start holding some landowner workshops, again, free of charge, related to habitat management. We're going to go over specifically what I was talking about, what these different practices are, the different types of habitat there are, and it's not just going to be here. So if you have property in Oregon County, if you have property in New Hampshire County, if you have property all the way up by Hannibal, we're going to be talking about those habitat types. They're going to be holding those workshops as well. So if you are interested in anything like that, please write your name and email on that list, and we'll be sure to include you in any of those emails that get sent out about upcoming workshops. So, if no other questions, I'll turn it over to Matt.
All right. Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it. If we kind of wrap up the conversation as far as we're concerned, if you have questions, you're working through all this, we have established this kind of what we kind of call our CWD hotline. So everyone in St. John, Jefferson, Perry, all the counties involved with CWD now have access to this phone number. When it rings, it comes up CWD on our phone lines. In the Cape office, we know exactly is someone calling something related to CWD, so only a certain number of people will answer that number. So if you need any questions for this, write that down, take a picture of whatever you need to do. But it's a good source of information related to anything concerning CWD in this area. So call that number if you got questions, if you're trying to fill out your management permits or whatever. Don't hesitate. If you got problems or issues, call it up, and whoever answers will probably be able to help you, or if they can't, then I promise you we'll get you whatever answer you need. So it's kind of a unique thing we have in our region, but it's been really successful to have that number up there and give people and that number's the same as it's always been. When we do winter operations discussions in January, that's the same number that we have. So I'll flip back to that in just a second. The other information here, if you want statewide information, the website up there on the top is our statewide CWD information page. You want to go on there, you can see how many deer we've shot wherever in the state that you want to. You can also send emails to that email address. If I was you, I'd call the phone number before I send some of that email address. But if you prefer to do email, then send it there. It's going to get routed to us. Probably if it has anything to do with these counties down here. Any questions before we wrap up that folks have? Yes, sir.
Is that number good for the weekend too?
It's not good for the weekend. Generally, it's just during the, it's different than our hotline number right during winter operations. That's a different number. But leave a message and we'll check them. Now, if you call, in July, sometimes we may not always be checking that number, but if you bring that number in the daytime, we'll answer.
Now, sir, there is a chance if somebody is working at the nature center on a Saturday,
Right, there could be.
they could answer it possibly.
Yep.
Because there are a couple girls there that do answer that line.
I have a little problem on that as I got to learn the CWD season of getting a number right. Something got me.
Yeah, the permits that you get during postseason, everything that you get has that number. We try to fix labels, everything, so if you have, not this number, that's the hotline number that you call if you shoot a deer. You call that number and it'll get you a hotline and report that to that deer. That's a different number than this one. This is just general information. So, other questions? Hey, I tell this every time to everyone when we do these meetings. We keep doing these meetings because you keep showing up. Okay? I want to make sure that you guys understand if there's there's information that we're not giving you, that before you walk out that door stomping off saying, gosh dang it, I wish they would have told us this, tell us what you want to know. Okay? I will give you whatever information we can, whatever information we have. If you want to know how we're going to stop CWD tomorrow, I don't really have that information. But if you need to know something that we're not covering here, then let us know. We'll try to make sure that we get that information to you. We want to make sure these meetings are very informational for you guys, and we're giving you stuff that's useful in the end. But if you don't tell me, and we're missing the mark here, then I'd rather you tell me and we try to hit the mark next time than you just go home and we never have another one of these meetings again. I enjoy getting out, seeing some familiar faces. And I hope that when you go back and talk to folks, you can tell folks, hey, yeah, next time they do one of these. I mean, we send a letter out to every landowner telling them we're having these meetings. If you're in the core areas, we're sending email to everybody. So spread the word. I think they're informational. I think they're good. They're time well spent for us as long as some folks show up to them. But if we show up one of these days and nobody's here, then we'll probably back up and rethink doing these. So.
In the winter season, chronic wicked, you have to call and get it, or can you learn the box is still there, the freezing box?
The post season?
Right after.
Yeah, after January 15th, the boxes get picked up. So after January 15th, all bets are off. We basically start over. So your management permits are no good, and the freezer head drop stations are not out there anymore. We reset because that's a management season. It's not a hunting season. So what we're authorizing you to do is different than giving you a permit to take additional.
So you call the number and they can come and get your deer.
Once you got to sign up to get authorization to shoot those deer, and then we switch over to that where you've got that authorization. You call it up that evening. We'll come out and get the deer from you, or take a sample and you process it yourself. However you do.
There we go.
Any other questions? Sure. All right, come on.
This ain't nothing to do with CWD, but, we didn't always have a fall turkey season. bad a shape does the turkey have to get in before we put, where we shoot hens?
So what's been determined is the fall harvest of turkeys is does not really have much impact on population. It's very minimal, the number of turkeys shot during the fall. And so everything we see adds up to having very minimal impact at all on the number of turkeys that are there come next spring. Now, I understand from a point of, well, it's a live turkey and it's a dead turkey. We have the same argument about shooting does in January 16th to March 16th. Yes, there was a baby inside that doe, but that baby was inside that doe from November when you would have shot during regular season, right? It's one of those things, I get it, but everything we see out there, the data that we're getting back is the number of turkeys harvested in the fall does not impact population in the end. A lot of those birds would have died through the winter, through predation, or some other way. It's very minimal impact.
A little confused why we didn't, when we first opened the spring turkey season, how come we didn't have a fall turkey season then? We didn't have fall turkey.
Right, we didn't start with the fall turkey season. Right. I think it was just one of those things, like we opened turkey, we opened up the turkey season, and then we graduated into the fall season. So yeah, we have a lot of focus on turkeys right now as an agency. I know we've got a couple commissioners that are very dedicated to trying to figure out what's going on with turkeys. It's far more complicated than just turkeys being shot in the fall, right?
I understand.
And I know you're not saying that, but
No, I'm not saying that.
Right.
Because predators.
predators, habitat,
But
we just
we
spoke
have
about that.
really no control. Can't force somebody to go out and catch hens when there ain't work nothing.
right.
And you can't keep a bobcat from catching a hen. So you can keep a human from shooting.
Well, and the fall harvest is probably relatable to the number of deer shot by hunters, right? We have a lot of people out there hunting them, but the number of turkeys actually being shot is pretty minimal.
There's a lot of research going on nationwide, especially in the southeast part of the nation, and the one common denominator in those turkey numbers that they're finding so far is that the largest issue with the reduction in turkey numbers is that poult survival rate. Right now, turkey poult survival rate's at about 0.9, which for a bird that'll hatch out 13 poults sometimes, that's ridiculous. So, and they thought it was the nest predators, which it is 100% partially the nest predators. A lot of it is once they get to that stage, I forget what the time range is, but essentially, once they're up and moving, after they can fly even, for some reason, there's a really weird age gap in there where they're not adults, but they're not quite at that really small chick phase still, where that's where that survival rate is really decreasing. So there's still a lot of active research going on about that, and even where they've tried to get that research information on the hunting numbers, it's not, in Missouri specifically, since our season's a little bit later, it's not having as much of an impact as what we thought it was at first.
A lot of states seeing the same impact we are with our turkey season. A lot of these states are seeing the turkey numbers really decline.
And then the other thing is, when our deer population wasn't great, we had units.
Yep.
We get Bordeaux tags here, which you have to send and get them and so on.
Yep.
But turkeys, there's no units. They just kill them everywhere. So where I'm at, there's a lot more turkeys in other places, but not as close to me. But yet the whole state is in one decline.
Managing wildlife always comes down to how small and whatever you want to manage it.
I mean, why wouldn't they put St. Genevieve County in a unit, or the county in a unit, and then now you're only allowed to kill so many turkeys in the fall here, and you can kill more over here possibly if there's more turkey.
Continue to try to figure out how to simplify regs more than complicate regs. As I say that, we have a 76-page deer booklet on deer season. So try to make sure that we're not overcomplicating things. Somebody comes into that in any way, does the biological impact of micromanaging your turkey population outweigh the overcomplication of regulation? We still got to figure that out sometimes. So
It's just that I know you can't, the fur prices gone.
yeah, that's the complicated thing, right?
That's adding
Yeah.
a lot more predators.
Not many people out there trapping.
So it's hard for a human to control that, but it's not hard to not shoot the turkey, period.
Any other questions? We'll be here. If you got questions afterwards, feel free to come up and talk. Folks, I really appreciate y'all coming out. Hope everybody has a good night tonight, stay cool next couple of days, and holler if you need anything from us.